Now I seem to have at least a couple of people's attention. This is the intro to the intro. So my name's Richard. I'm one of the folks at Fabric who have helped bring you today's event. And we'll get into sponsors and contributors and thank yous or whatever sort of later. Because my entire job right now, apart from getting your attention, is to introduce you to my partner, Max.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. And we know you could be in a queue waiting for your DevCon ticket somewhere in a hot space, or you could be looking at refreshing your portfolio tracker given the night we've had. But instead you're here. To give a bit of sort of background on the event, or some context, yesterday I was at the DuneCon event listening to Vitalik's Fireside chat, and one of the topics that came up was sort of what is the intersection of AI with Web3. I think it's a topic that's been discussed quite often by many people, but his view on it was that it's not so much what can AI do for crypto, which is often discussed, but we should also think about what can crypto do for AI, or what can Web3 do for AI. And I think one of the sort of the core topics that we've been really good at in the Web3 space is coordination. Coordination and attribution of skills, of data, of work, of monetary and sort of incentives. And so I think that's one lens to look at it with. And obviously from the flip side of the other topic that we have today, which is social, what does the future of Web3 social look like in a world where it's not just humans? It might be humans, pseudonymous humans, but also agents, bots, machines, and you name it, in a future where sort of AI and bots and agents are prevalent. And so those are some of the topics we'll be discussing. Richard and Lata will be running a couple of panels with some great guests. Maybe before we move on to those, just a quick background on Fabric. We've been sort of collectively and separately investing since 2012 in AI and in Web3, and sort of under the Fabric brand since 2016-17. North of 100 portfolio companies in the space, quite a few in these two topics specifically, the likes of Near, of Primitives, of Lens, RSS3/Open, Exo Labs, CrunchDAO, and quite a few others. And so we have a fund that we're willing to and looking to deploy at the sort of pre-seed and seed, continue to be very active in the space and happy to talk about anything on these two topics. And before we move on, a big thank you to a lot of our co-hosts and contributors who you'll be hearing from today, the teams at Near, at LivePeer, at Open, at Open Social, at LivePeer, sorry, I've mentioned LivePeer already, at Lens and at Solana. And so with that, I'll pass it on to Richard Werlener.
Yeah, exactly. We'll keep passing the introduction round until it's evening time. So thanks, Max. That was very well put. So I'm, without further ado, going to dive into a little fireside chat with somebody who you probably already know. Illia, if you want to come out to the stage, that'd be great. I think you probably need a mic. One of these. There's nothing like a gathering of technologists to have technology failure. That's always going to happen. The mic. Okay, great. Well, so welcome to the stage. So we're just going to continue on that theme, and the purpose, I guess, of this fireside chat is just to reflect on the longer-term direction of where this is all going. And I think, so we're going to get into, I talk a little bit like things like the death of the App Store, as if that's kind of a major thing. But I think we can think even further afield than that. But I think critically, and I do sort of wear kind of two hats. I have a Fabric hat, but I also work a lot with Illia at Near. And it's not just because of that Near hat, but I feel that we're at a real turning point as an industry and within Near. We've finally got to the point where, you know, the blockchains can scale, that through various levels of abstraction, they become usable and developable. And there's been a great conference the last couple of days, Redacted, that Near's put on. And then now we're kind of upgrading, or perhaps, you know, finally marrying the blockchain and Web3 world with the words of agents and ultimately robots, maybe even, which is perhaps what it was always intended for. And so all of those coming together extremely fast. And I think the possibilities are very varied. So I'm going to allow Illia to introduce himself and what he's been working on, and then we're going to unpack some of those, how that's actually going to work.
Hi, well, thank you. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm Illia. co-founder of Near, and we're blockchain for AI. And so a lot of things we've been doing has been about how to make a blockchain that scales effectively to the need of the future. As well, this year we restarted actually something that is our origin, which is Near AI. So originally, before going into blockchain, we were an AI company. And even for that, like at the time in 17, we had a challenge, which was how do we coordinate a lot of people to contribute to what we were building, right? We were trying to build a model that teaches computers to code, and we had a challenge that, like, you have like few people in a basement in somewhere in San Francisco trying to build a model. You don't have resources of Google. How do you actually build something? How do you outcompete? And the way to do that is to engage people around the world, right? Engage students, engage kind of folks who are interested, who can contribute in data, in code, in research, in open source. But you need a way to coordinate that, and it didn't exist, right? We started looking at crypto as a way to do that. Like, hey, we can pay small bounties for data contributions, but and we were doing that actually on fiat. We were sending like PayPal. We were doing TransferWise. We actually like OTC'd some money into WeChat Pay so we can actually pay people in China. But it was like a patchwork of insanity. And so crypto seemed like a right solution. It's like, hey, we can orchestrate global workforce effectively with this approach. Except actually every transaction fee even back then was already higher than what we were paying people, and so even like at 30 cents per transaction. And so we ended up like, well, that's strange. Like, this is just code running on machines. Why is it so expensive? And so that's where you jump on the scalability train. And you're like, well, I'm coming from Google. My co-founder built Charter Database. Like, we know how to scale the systems. We were a little bit cocky, so instead of 6 months,
you have to be a bit cocky to be a good founder.
So we were like, yeah, we're going to do it in 6 months and go back to AI. So it took a little bit longer. but yeah, so, the blockchain is out there. It's scalable. It has kind of all the properties you need to build on top of this. And now, kind of with advancements around LLMs, we have an opportunity to really change now how we experience and how we interact with computing. And that's actually what Near AI was trying to do. Like, if you can imagine that you can effectively, by talking to a computer, not just like it can fetch information and do things, but actually it can write code, it can build software, it can on the fly effectively generate interactions and action plans and interfaces. You don't actually need most of software that exists right now. All the software as a service is effectively dead in this case. Most of the apps are dead as well. And so you actually kind of turning around how we interacting with computing itself. And that's what original vision of Near AI was. And now we know how this is going to look. And so we can dive into that.
Yeah, and so I think that talks a little bit to this intersection between, should we say, blockchains and AI. What about this intersection with the notion of Web3 social apps or primitives? So there have been a few different approaches. Some have been kind of app-first development, more than kind of Farcast or Walkcast direction. Obviously, our friends at Lens are much more, let's not envisage any app and let's build kind of protocol-level primitives that are truly kind of unopinionated. So you talked about like experiences that are not just an existing, like a piece of user interface that can just be instantiated anytime, anywhere, but are kind of perhaps new bits of code that can be generated in order to deliver on whatever you as an individual use. So can you, in that context, how do we think about even the application layer going forward, sitting on top of combined AI kind of Web3 environment?
Yeah, so I think that there's a few components. So one component is how you're going to be interacting with effectively your devices, right? And that, I think, will be facilitated by your AI assistant. So it will be some AI-enabled interface which is able to understand your intent. It knows your context. It has all your private data. So we want it to be private. We don't want it to leak all your data to some company. And it is able to then route your requests as well as fetch data that you need from other parties, right? And so that's kind of where the layer of effectively intents and routing comes in. And then those services can be a traditional service, right? It can be a restaurant, it can be a smart contract on chain, or it can be an AI agent itself that is able to kind of talk in natural language and interface with it. Now, the social part here comes in an interesting way, and in general, it comes in as in a way that like this interface, I mean, to the point like people actually don't know what they want, right? And so in many cases, most of why the Instagram and TikTok are actually the most popular apps is because people go there when they're bored and like want to see what's up there, right? Why X is effectively, a town hall and like 99% of the time you're spending reading it, not writing into it. And so you need a kind of a feed effectively that is generated for you. Like that is where the world, came, and it's effectively the way we're interacting with computing now. But right now, all of these feeds are generated not for you, even though it says for you feed. It's actually for making money off you.
For Coca-Cola.
Well, not an X anymore.
A Mercedes.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, it should be saying for making money off you feed. And so the question is, what is actual for you feed is? And it's, it should be actually understanding what your goals are, right? Like I'm learning something, I want to, see what are the updates from the conferences and what are the news updates as well. And so it actually constructs all that on the fly, fetches it from data sources, from creators, from moderators, from whatever the kind of information flow is, and is able to summarize some things, allow you to go in deep. And then now, how do you monetize all this? Well, this is where microtransactions come in, where potentially advertisement that runs, again, on your device, but is effectively controlled by your AI assistant, and you just send a proof effectively from your TE on a device that you watched advertisement to the, effectively like you send the receipt that you watched an advertisement to a news...
Attention receipt.
Attention receipt to a news organization. They can cash it out from the advertiser, right? So you can have all the systems, and like no human will do like microtransactions for like few cents per article. This is just like not experience we can comprehend. But AI can do this very effectively, and this is again where blockchain is like a facilitator, a tool, an instrument, and also like what you can kind of root everything in to actually coordinate these efforts.
I think it's super exciting. I think all of these pieces are coming together incredibly. So you mentioned privacy around, say, your sort of personal agent and your desires that you might sort of over time perhaps configure it with. And it's sort of well understood that there's a lot of money involved in building the biggest sort of foundational models. Now, historically, I've made perhaps the mistake of characterizing our kind of mission as a struggle a little bit between maybe even the rebellion and the empire, and let's think obviously the empire being the tech titans of today, and I made that mistake actually to describe it that way to a senior figure at Google, and he kind of reprimanded me in the sense that hopefully we're going to end up in a messy middle where we're all going to have there's be compromises on both sides, and it's up to us to kind of, if you will, fight our good fight to get there. But in that context, you made a sort of super big announcement yesterday, including the numbers 1.4 trillion in the context of the parameters of a model. I think it'd be good to unpack what the intention is there. Also, your thoughts about some people's view. There are people in our community's view that ultimately only Apple and Android are going to win when it comes to your personal agent, because this has to be embedded in the OS and because of privacy amongst other kind of considerations. So those two questions: is it only OpenAI on the foundational models?
Well, clearly not.
And is it only Apple in terms of the agents?
Yeah, so we made an announcement, and like I'll tell kind of it's the same story as everything we've done so far, right? We start with like, hey, we're gonna use somebody else's stuff. We're gonna use somebody else's blockchain. Clearly, people have been working on this for a long time. No, we cannot use it. We need to build our own, right? Because it doesn't scale, it doesn't work. The programming environment is extremely complex. The user experience is complete shit, right? Same thing with AI models. We started with like, we're obviously not going to train our own model. This is nuts. It's expensive. This is not like we can fine tune. We have, we have crowdsourcing. We have coordinated resources. We can do this. Then like specialized models for specific use cases, and then kind of all the open source models come out, and none of them are even closely compared to what's closed source available. Right, like they're so far.
So that'd be good for the audience to unpack that a little bit, because there was a point in time when it was announced closed source was definitely going to win, and there was a big gap. Then for a while, the gap seemed to kind of narrow. What's your view on where things stand today?
Yeah, I mean the gap is still pretty wide, and again, it's like it's unclear. Like it's not really even like for smaller models. I think it's caught up, but like as we go to like bigger than 100 billion parameters, effectively the gap is wide open. Like it feels like it's going the other way, and so that's why we're like, okay, well, we know how to train these models, we know how to coordinate a lot of people, we know how to raise funds in open way, and so the only problem was how to monetize it. And I've been struggling with this problem for effectively a year, and been like brainstorming ideas and pitching different ideas to people, because okay, how do we actually do this? And effectively like some of the evolution in the hardware that enables to do this, where you actually can run training of the model itself inside secure environment, inside CPU and GPU, means we can actually train a model in open source way, in distributed way, in decentralized way even, and have weights encrypted. So nobody is able to freely use them. You always need to pay. So now we have a monetization loop, but these models are completely available, permissionless. Anybody can use them. There's no way to restrict who can use them. And importantly, you can build on top of them. You can fine tune it. You can do all the same thing you can do as open source. So it's actually effectively open source, encrypted binary, versus what right now is closed source, because we have no idea what these models are trained on, and open binary, right? And so that actually enables this full loop of, okay, we can effectively have, hey, let's build a new next generation 70 billion model. We raise money, we build the model, like we get a bunch of hardware. It's also, H100s are way more available now than they were 6 months ago. Everybody's effectively doesn't know what to do with them anymore. There is a ton of like 1,000 to 4,000 GPU clusters available on the market. So you can actually spin up a cluster of like 10,000, but it's not fully collocated. So we do need some distributed training. And then you can train the model, you can publish it. Now everybody can use it permissionlessly, open. You can run it on your own hardware. You can run it on kind of cloud hardware. You have privacy now as a basic primitive. No single company, no single person is able to access what's on GPU. Right now, again, whatever you use, if you're using anything that is decentralized, I'm sorry, somebody else sees this data. Like, if you're literally going right now to something that says decentralized, there is some other server, some third party that sees your data. And you don't actually know, at least with OpenAI, you know it's OpenAI. Like, in decentralized way, you don't actually know who's seeing your data.
So we're going to come to that. Can I put together what you just said for the audience, or like play it back, in my own words? So we're talking about a time now where you can build an application, maybe that uses agents to get quite complex tasks for you, done for you. It might be kind of like finding the gluten-free burgers across Bangkok, and booking a table for you, some kind of moderately complex thing. Or it might be something even more important around long-term healthcare, diabetes, whatever, type 2 diabetes. So this application gets built. They involve data, personal data, contextual data, whatever. They use agents. But now that can be tied back at scale, because now we've got blockchains that can support it, to the training, fine tuning, and inference stages of using kind of models. And importantly, from a Web3 perspective, there's actually a business model involved in that involves bringing people paying value into the system from the outside and the whole thing kind of connecting.
Yeah, effectively now you have, when you use a model, you do a microtransaction effectively that happens on blockchain. All of these microtransactions get aggregated and distributed to everyone who contributed to building this model. So we're effectively using the blockchain for what it's for, which is building this new, more kind of fluid business models that are almost impossible to do with like massive transactional fees and massive kind of complexity around setting up payment in traditional finance. And it's again effectively enabled because trusted hardware, payment channels, blockchain identity, kind of coordinated resource, tokens, all of these pieces working together as kind of one model, and then using effectively AI to as a product now to all of these different use cases that people actually want.
Yeah. And the ecosystem that's built there's a lot of pretty raw primitives. It's an area where people can experiment, build whatever they want. I mean, it's kind of very open. But you mentioned this point about the fact that maybe it's comforting that it's only Sam seeing your data in the context of the training of the OpenAI models. One of the defenses that OpenAI will have for why distributed training should not be the direction to go actually operates at the level of national security. That not surprisingly, as one's trying to build artificial general intelligence, governments, should we say, view this as something of the same significance as the Manhattan Project. So if you take that point and also the question of the role that companies like OpenAI have in ensuring that there's, should we say, safety and alignment in the outcomes that these, and ultimately the inferences that these models produce, what do you think is going to happen from a governmental perspective, and how are we going to deal with that on our side?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of aspects here. So one aspect, which is Alex Kidanov actually uses as an example, is all the safety work that OpenAI and Anthropic are doing for making their model safe doesn't actually help when somebody malicious is trying to make a malicious model, because they just focused on themselves. They're not focused on the external world, right? So all of the kind of hey, we're gonna make sure that our model is safe. He's yeah, but somebody can go effectively raid your data center, get all the GPUs out, put them on a ship in the sea, and then train a model and then do whatever, right? So now, obviously, that's a little bit of extreme case, but I'm just saying right now it's kind of it's a little bit of a lipstick on a pig. It's an illusion that we're gonna make our own stuff safe, and we believe nobody else is able to do this. That's effectively I mean, some of it is just massive amounts of Kool-Aid pool that they are swimming in. Now, what are the actually ways to do this? Well, the interesting thing is, again, because what we do now is train them inside a controlled environment that is controlled by protocol, right? We could actually enforce, and the inference will be happening inside the same environment. We can enforce a set of things that, if effectively a DAO or a community agrees on, that applies to the inference. And so this goes to formal verification and other pieces, but generally speaking, if there is an agreement that we should not, anyone should not be able to do inference on whatever biological agents that are fast spreading, well, we can apply some of those rules, and effectively all of the distributed clusters who are doing inference will actually, filter that out. But that needs to be an agreement of all of the people. And again, I don't think, practically speaking, that would be really hard to do. But if that exists, that governance becomes actually a really important question as we're approaching that. And that's why formal verification, a lot of other tooling is needed effectively as a way to create a formal constraints instead of just trying to the other thing is a lot of the current safety work is just patchwork. Oh, don't say this, don't say that, and then well, tell it me in Pig Latin, and it's still works, right? Or tell it me in ASCII characters, or tell it me backwards, and it's LLM just still doing it because the filtering they've done. So part of it is also how do we actually do formal constraints mathematically expressed that something is indeed dangerous, and everybody agrees on that, and then we have this kind of constraints deployed into these environments where the inference is happening.
And then the safety is no longer an illusion. I think it's really interesting, OpenAI have it in their name, obviously, and they can talk about a belief in openness, to whatever degree suits their kind of their particular flavor of Kool-Aid. but we're hearing you talk about, decentralization at multiple different levels, on the, training level, sourcing of data, governance, importantly. So I think you can see a clear role for the intersection of these two worlds. Now, I have two sort of directions to take us before we perhaps take a question or two, maybe from our lovely audience. One question is, as you now look forward 5-10 years, and you've already been prescient in the problems that need to be solved, what are the kind of research topics? What are the bits you look at and go, that's just you're maybe, are you more cocky or less cocky than you were, or more naive or less naive than you were kind of 5-10 years ago? As you look forward, there must be some problems you look at and go, that's pretty challenging. That's science. We need to kind of invent. So that's one side. And the other is, for maybe this audience, and more broadly at DevCon in Bangkok and I guess across the world, importantly, what are the opportunities for founders? So it may not involve science, but what can they get involved with? And then again, for the audience, if you've got a question, we'll take maybe one or something afterwards.
Yeah, so I'm definitely pretty cocky still, but it's informed by ability to actually execute. So hopefully, it just takes a bit longer usually than I expect. That's why I have the team who tells me the deadlines now. I don't say the deadlines. I'm like, you tell me what the deadline will be.
It's a common affliction in software.
I'm like, we need 200 millisecond blocks, but they're like, what? I'm like, 200 millisecond blocks. I'm like, okay, well, let us go figure out how to do that. And they figured out. They came back, so we have a plan. Great. No, I think the science part is, the decentralized and distributed training is still, it is some science required. There is, some initial work on how this is going to work. And it's been tested, but it's been tested in very small, relatively small kind of models and clusters. There is a question of, as you scale these models, so kind of one of the things we are looking at, in general, because you don't want to you don't want to slow down inference. As you scale the model, you slow down inference as well, right? It needs to process all these parameters. So, OpenAI uses mixture of experts effectively to offset that. Now, mixture of experts has a lot of, has a trade-off in it. Can you do mixture of experts in a distributed, decentralized way more effectively? Because it's kind of, it is a combination of experts, so maybe we can do it better, right? In such a way where we actually have maybe experts bidding for things or something else, right? So that's an interesting area of research and actual experimentation. And so part of what we're doing with Research Hub is actually providing this platform to allow to do this. And you mentioned before the question of this, emperor versus the rebellion. Yeah. And so the interesting thing is kind of ideally we build a platform where the OpenAI wants to be on this platform, actually being a participant there because it's kind
100%.
of valuable to them, right? It's the same as open internet. All these big companies are on internet, right? Because that's actually beneficial for them. So that's kind of how do we turn it around and how do we actually have their researchers actually participating in this, because that's moving the envelope for them as well. So I think that's kind of one dimension, and maybe it's not OpenAI, but other companies which are more open right now. And then going to founders, I think there is effectively two sides of opportunities. There's more, but two really big shapes, right? So one shape is how to build the best effective user experience, right? And to your point is is this going to be all Apple? Well, maybe eventually it's going to be hardware. And then actually I think every big consumer application will become its own phone manufacturer. You'll maybe white label, but you'll effectively will optimize the form factor and your app together.
And not just phones, little robots as well.
Little robots, it can be flying, saucers, whatever, the watches, the pins, all of the form factors. That's how do you get inputs from the user and how do you get outputs, right? And this is where right now the opportunity is. Chain abstraction is great, component as well, that as well. We have now Intents at providing really interesting experiences. So all of this is really open environment now to, you can integrate open social as like a protocol to surface the social content. So you have like lots of tools now, lots of infrastructure. So we need consumer apps, right? Then the other side of this is effectively AI agents and service integrations into existing systems, right? Like there's all these companies around which have no like understanding how they're going to be relevant in the AI world, right? And so they're all going to be looking for a solution which will bring them into AI.
Not just companies, cities and countries as well.
Cities, countries, yeah, at all levels, they're going to be effectively like, hey, I'm a Holiday Inn. I'm just looking at it. It's like, how am I going to do stuff in AI, right? And so there's an opportunity here to do a B2B business, which is like, hey, we're going to turn all of your service layer, all of your effectively website, all of your backend into AI-enabled, effectively intent-enabled system so that anybody can book hotels, anybody can just walk in. Like, I don't need to go to check-in desk every time. I can just walk into my room, scan with NFC with my phone, and walk into the room, right? Like it doesn't need to be, the current experience doesn't need to be there. Like, none of the steps required, right? Like, you can walk in, you get a push notification with your room number.
And your vegan burger is right there.
And your vegan burger, yeah. So all of this is like totally possible, and so like that's a room right now that a lot of it is like more integrating with their existing systems or kind of helping them rebuild the existing systems, and then adding a little bit of AI and blockchain on top. But I mean, obviously there's opportunities around like, I mean, the example I was just like thinking is like, I want to build, for example, a 25-story building, right? That's a massive project. Right now, I need to hire someone, they need to hire someone, they need to hire someone. There's like 5 levels of, indirect recruitment. There is, like subcontractors. There's all the types of logistics to deliver things, getting permits, getting licenses, all the things. You can imagine an AI agent that is coordinating all of that. Some of this is still going to be done by people, but some of this can be done directly by AI agents. So that's like, you take one task, right, and you take something big and you like literally, okay, let's just end-to-end it, and then we still, man in the middle when we need, but we like control it effectively through the AI, and you iterate and you get it to work to become like, okay, now you have an AI building agent.
Well, this is music to my ears. Any founders out there who can help address the challenges in the construction industry, and particularly builders in the UK, please let me know.
So by the way, there is an agent that calls. So there's already like tooling that actually can call. We're actually planning to plug it into our research hub as well. And so you'll be able to say like, hey, call for me this number, and talk to them about this. So for example, for permitting, you can effectively spam all the permitting with your AI agent, just calling them to get the permits.
Look, I mean, it's going to be transformational for sure. Like project planning, visualizing what it is you're going to build, and creating marketplaces for every single contract that you need to put in place there.
I mean, yeah, it's effectively an intent that you can auction off. Like, hey, I need 5,000 pieces of glass. Like, who can fulfill that?
Yeah, radical markets is where we're headed. So I promised one. I'm being signaled at the back of the room. What are you saying? Oh, is there one quick question from anybody? It is warm up here. Keep the fans going. Did we need stage lights as well as the sun? There you go.
Test. This is for Illia. So you may or may not remember that NVIDIA, 10 years, spoke to their customers and asked, would you be willing to pay for high-speed processors? And the quintessential answer was absolutely not. Here we are today, they're paying for high-speed processors. Is there something that you can analogize to Near in terms of your vision that didn't align with the market that you've done and what you've pushed forward today?
Literally everything.
Without the arrogance.
No, I mean, I think like we've struggled to explain the consumer part. We've really pushed in like 2022, and I think I think somehow in crypto, especially after like DeFi summer, it was oh, we don't actually need consumers. The degens is going to be running here, and this is how, and the money is the most important. And I think that tide is really changing now. And people yes, we actually need users, and we want to bring the rest of the world into this ecosystem. And so I'm really happy to see that. I'm really excited. We just partnered with Infinex on exactly this premise. And that was a transition, right? Kane started was very much focused on DeFi, degens, and kind of now is hey, actually, let's bring everyone, right? Because people are using Binance and not coming to DeFi. So that's a really, simple example where we've invested a lot and how do we make a user experience really easy to use, readable accounts, multiple keys, etc., kind of really underneath. And people indeed were yeah, I mean, whatever. I'm fine with my MetaMask. That was a big feedback for me. Is yeah, why your wallet? I'm fine with my MetaMask, which we also announced. We support MetaMask now, but yeah. So that would be a pretty big example of this.
Great, good question. Look, it was tough to see the path a few years ago, and you've shown that confidence. It's just the confidence side of cockiness, but also some humility to take the blows when they come and keep forging on. Congratulations on that. Thanks everybody for being here, and that's a wrap.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much, Richard and Illia. A round of applause, please.